Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Bucks County Association of Realtors presentation of Lessons Learned from Long Island Divided. I'm so happy to kick off this program with noted investigative journalist Bill Dedman. This event is a labor of love that originated with our fabulous DEI committee chaired by Darlene Meekins and Rose Yuan. It is the culmination of many months of hard work, and I thank them and their committee for knocking this one out of the park. This event is part of the Fair Housing Challenge that the DEI committee has issued in honor of Fair Housing Month. We're going to put the challenge information into the chat so that everyone can participate in that. I'm also honored to welcome guests from multicultural organizations such as ARIA, NAREB, PMBD, the Asian Chamber of Commerce, the Realtists, Bank of America, and HSBC. And I apologize if I missed anyone. We have folks zooming in from all over the country, including Hawaii. Welcome to all. Now, before I turn this over to Darlene to introduce Bill, I just need to share a few housekeeping details. First, please keep yourself muted throughout the program. You can put any questions you may have into the chat and we'll be sure to get them answered at some point. A recording of this presentation is going to be sent out to all registrants and all BCAR members after the program. So that's it. That's all I have. That's all you're going to hear from me. And I'm going to turn this over to Darlene. So Darlene, feel free to take it away.
Darlene, you're muted.
You're muted, Darlene.
I'm sorry. Well, thank you, Pam, for this opportunity to be the moderator for this important subject, and especially during Fair Housing Month. For those of you that might have questions during this event, I'm going to ask you to please put those questions in the chat, and then we'll address as many as we can toward the end of the program. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Bill Dedman. Bill is a Pulitzer and Peabody Award-winning investigative reporter and best-selling author. He has spoken on fair housing and fair lending issues for the National Association of Realtors, the Federal Reserve, HUD, and banking and real estate associations. Bill received the 1989 Pulitzer Prize in Investigative Reporting for his work at the Atlanta Journal Constitution on the Color of Money, his series on racial discrimination by banks and savings and loans associations in middle-income Black neighborhoods. The Color of Money led to expanded federal laws on disclosure of loan data, new financing for middle-income homebuyers, and great awareness of systematic discrimination. The articles in The Color of Money are online at powerreporting.com. That's powerreporting.com. 30 years later, Bill was one of the 4 lead reporters on the Newsday's undercover investigation of racial steering by real estate agents, Long Island Divided. Long Island Divided led to a reckoning in the real estate industry with new national training for agents, more testing of brokerages, and new state laws on fair housing. Newsday's team received several national awards for their work, including a Peabody Award. Long Island Divided and its 40-minute documentary film, Testing the Divide, are online at Newsday, NEWSDAY.com/divided. Bill has reported for the Associated Press, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Boston Globe. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Bill Dedman. Take it away.
Thank you, Darlene. Thank you. It's good to be with you all this afternoon.
Pam and Lisa, Darlene, all those of you on the committee who worked to put this together. I'm excited to have an opportunity to share with you sort of an inside look, a behind the scenes look at our Newsday investigative team's work on fair housing. You know, it might be surprising to you. It was certainly surprising to me that the real estate industry has responded positively to a newspaper's investigation. We don't get a lot of that. I've spoken now with more than 100 real estate associations across the country about lessons learned from Long Island Divided. And we're having our second session coming up next week with the Long Island Board of Realtors. It seems that our team's testing on fair housing has sparked an important conversation, but also action, with industry leaders saying these are practices that must change and change soon. Let me give you two examples. When the CEO of Realogy, now called Anywhere Real Estate, Anywhere Real Estate is the largest real estate company in the United States. And you know it owns the brands Coldwell Banker and Century 21 and Sotheby's International Realty. When that CEO says, we should be testing as a company, we should be testing our own brokers and agents, because testing is an important way to know whether we're following the law. Well, that's a change. Something has changed. And when the National Association of Realtors has embraced this idea of self-testing of agents and says, we'll help make that happen, connecting brokers and companies to fair housing groups to do that testing, more change is coming. The thinking seems to be, if we don't get ahead of this ourselves, if we don't police ourselves, we'll have more government investigations and we'll have more of these kinds of embarrassing government and media investigations. Let me share some slides with you as we go. There we go. You should see a slide with some contact information. And the front page of our series will show that contact information again in a few minutes. Besides, there's a recognition that it's the right thing to do, that these are practices that need to be fixed, not just in April, not just during Fair Housing Month. My goal for this session is for it to be helpful to you, but also challenging, giving you something to think about. What are the ways that unequal treatment might creep into our work, even if, of course, we intend to be fair? We'll dive into looking at some of our videos, a few of our clips of Newsday video of real estate agents in action, admittedly, perhaps not on their best days. And we'll talk about best practices, steps that brokers and agents can take to treat everybody fairly. We also will talk about some of the most difficult questions, such as what can and should agents say about schools? I start from this perspective. I assume that all of you want to make sure that every customer who calls or emails or walks in to your office is treated fairly. Darlene?
Yes. Now, you won the Pulitzer Prize for an investigation into mortgage lending practices. I thought it might be interesting for our viewers to hear a brief summary of that investigation. And how does that investigation compare with this one?
There are a couple of connections that are important to, there's a thread that runs through here. The articles in the Atlanta newspapers were called The Color of Money. These stories were about redlining, the old practice, it was thought of, and of lenders making home loans, especially the banks, working in only part of their map, well, to be specific, collecting deposits from all parts of their map, but making home loans in only certain parts. Now, this was back in the late 1980s, and before most of you were born, and redlining had gotten attention earlier. It was thought of as something from the 60s or 70s. Just as recently, when Berkshire Hathaway's mortgage office in Pennsylvania paid a large settlement to settle a redlining case. People were so surprised that this is still going. We're shocked to hear that this is still happening.
Can you tell us why did Newsday?
Yes. It just say, let me tell just a bit more about this.
I'm sorry.
We found lenders were making home loans in Atlanta and other major cities, in white areas, even lower income white areas, but not in black areas, even in the higher income black areas of Atlanta that were homes to executives from Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines. This crude map, the journalism students laugh at how crude this is, but this still tells the story. This map shows where Atlanta's black neighborhoods were at that point, and where the Atlanta banks rarely made home loans. The main thing to understand is that the customer would have no way to know where the banks weren't lending. But we dug into how the banks were operating. We found differences in where branches had been closed and open. We found differences in which real estate agencies the banks were marketing their services and their rates to. We found even differences in which branches would accept a loan application. Now, let's connect that thread to a project for the Boston Globe in the 2000s, looking at something you'd think of as quite different. Traffic stops, speeding tickets. Our series was called Speed Trap, and it's online too. An interesting thing about being stopped by an officer for speeding is, in your lingo, we're all pre-qualified for the ticket. We were all speeding. But some people may get a break, a warning, that others may not get. What we found was that in Massachusetts, when we looked at every traffic ticket and warning in the state, was that it was pretty easy to predict who got the ticket and who got the warning. For going the same speed, if we knew the sex, age, and race of the driver. Does it surprise you that women more often got a warning for going the same speed over, especially younger women? I found a college student in the records and talked to her. She had gotten 4 warnings in 3 weeks. Women, does it surprise you that this break for you runs out at about age 40? Minorities much more often got the ticket, again, for going the same speed. Black and Latino men were far more likely than white men the same age to get the ticket, not the warning. Now, follow that thread. Again, the customers, we'll call the drivers customers, wouldn't know. Maybe even the officers wouldn't know how it breaks down. Now, take together these 3 very different stories. Redlining in bank lending, traffic tickets, steering in real estate. These are 3 places where people make judgments. What are the lessons in common? First, the absence of complaints tells you nothing about whether your office is obeying the law. Think about it logically. Bank customers, drivers on the highway, real estate customers have no way to know if they're being treated equally. If you get a warning or get a ticket, did everyone else going that speed get the same? How would you know? If you thought, that seems unfair, on what basis would you make a complaint? In real estate, a fix for steering can't be to say, well, I've been here a long time. I've never heard anybody complain. I've never seen anybody steer. Or if anyone did complain, we would respond forcefully to that. No one knows what listings were given to another customer. So how would they know to complain? Second lesson, diversity efforts alone will not fix these problems. Diversity in hiring and promotion of staff, for example, and in marketing is useful in many ways in your business and in mine, but it's not a cure-all. People often ask, were the minority real estate agents tested too? Yes, we had a very diverse group of agents we tested. And they ask, were the minority real estate agents also steering? Yes, some of them were. And that's just as illegal. We found real estate agents of all races and backgrounds steering customers. Just as we had found white and black police officers treating minorities more harshly than white drivers. We should no longer be surprised about this. In a regulated business, treating similarly situated people differently can be illegal, whether you're in their group or not in their group. It may be time to stop thinking of fair housing as a diversity issue, something nice to have, something that we put up posters for once a year, and start thinking of it as a risk reduction issue, as a compliance issue. Important to keep the broker's name out of the headlines and to keep your brokerage out of federal court. Third lesson, small actions and small policies and the absence of a policy, a loose process, can have a huge impact in creating and perpetuating a segregated system, because then some people may act on stereotype, and that will turn their test or their business practice in a certain direction. For example, it seemed clear that the realtors in our test did not have a rigorous standard, any standard about what they do and don't do with every customer, no checklist. We saw customers come back from the real estate office to our newspaper office, and some had a thick folder of information about schools and services, and others we'd say, well, hey, where's your folder? There was none. We'd check the video. There was no information, no handout. Well, that seems like something that you can fix. Do agents have consistent ways of qualifying customers? Do you ask credit scores and income of every buyer? That would be okay, that's legal. Or of no buyers? That's okay. Do you require pre-approval from every buyer before you'll take them out to look at houses? That's legal. It makes sense. You don't want to drive people all around Bucks County and beyond looking for houses if you don't know if they'll be able to get the mortgage, or maybe you're not shopping for the right price range for them. That's legal. Or maybe you require pre-approval from nobody. Hey, you've got a pulse, you're my buyer. I'll train you up. I'll refer you to a lender. I'll get you in first-time home buyer counseling. I'll make you a great client. That's legal. It's in between. If your office may have a policy, but some people get a break that others don't get, that's where you end up on YouTube. I'd like to share with you a little bit of video, just a little introductory part of our documentary film. The project is called Long Island Divided, and we call the film Testing the Divide. It's a documentary, it's about 45 minutes long, and in this session, we're going to look at about 10 minutes of that 45. They're all on the same website, and it's all free. You don't have to, it's not behind any paywall. It's free to get to. And we've shared the link. It's at newsday.com/divided. You'll see both of them. In this example here, you get a little introduction, and then you'll meet an agent. And one customer receives service from this agent, while the same agent refuses to help another customer who is in the same circumstance. Let me play that with you. It just takes a second. to start. And here it comes. Okay, are you ready?
But you don't want to go there. It's a mixed neighborhood.
Mixed neighborhood.
If agents are courteous and professional, how can you know that they're treating you equally compared with someone of a different race or ethnicity?
I have to say it without saying it, you know.
Behind smiles and handshakes, how do you know if they're giving you fewer options or suggesting different areas?
I'm not going to send you anything you want to unless you don't want to store your car to buy your friend.
Or that rules don't apply to you and another home buyer in the same way.
Yeah, okay, I definitely need that.
Long Island is one of America's most segregated suburbs. Newsday set out to discover what role real estate agents might play in keeping it that way, potentially affecting the quality of lives.
Technically, as a real estate agent, we shouldn't tell the buyers.
In house hunting, it's nearly impossible to see evidence of hidden discrimination. You would never know unless you go undercover.
In one test, Johnny Mae Alston was the black tester and Cindy Parry was the white tester. And they met with Anne-Marie Quealy-Bichon at Signature Premier Properties office in Cold Spring Harbor. They asked for the same thing. As often happens, the agent discussed getting pre-qualified or pre-approved for a mortgage by a bank, showing how much a buyer can spend on a house.
You pre-qualified, I guess? My husband's working with somebody in a bank. We've done some preliminary talks, about getting pre-approved.
Neither had been pre-approved or pre-qualified. Here's what the agent told the black tester.
So I really need that. I won't take out any money unless I do have a pre-qualification limit. So I need to. So that means I can't pre-qualify for a mortgage. Oh, so that means I can't go out to see anything. I won't do it. You can try another person, but I don't have the time.
And without pre-approval, here's what the agent told the white tester.
What is your availability? When can you start looking at houses? I would say not this coming week.
Cindy received 79 listings from this agent. Johnny Mae couldn't get any listings. And Cindy, the white tester, received 2 home tours. They had the same finances, the same budget, and they made the same request in the same area. But one was white, the other was black. The agent treated them differently.
Okay, Darlene, I'm ready for you.
Bill, can you tell us why did Newsday start this investigation in the beginning?
Yes. What's the newspaper doing sending out testers?
Mm-hmm.
You might be interested to know that Newsday had considered doing this very same project 30 years earlier. Had a long conversation. There was a lot of discomfort because it's deceptive sending out people who aren't what they say they are. And in the end, the Newsday decided not to do it. A journalism magazine wrote an article about Newsday's difficult decision. And then, of course, steering on Long Island continued for another 30 years. Let me set the scene. Some of you, of course, know New York, may know Long Island well. We're talking about an area stretching east of New York City, a suburban area where Newsday is the largest suburban newspaper. It's an area with almost 3 million people in 2 counties. That's about the population of Arkansas or Nevada. Long Island has a lot of diversity overall. With people from all races and nationalities. Long Island's demographics are quite close to the demographic mix of the nation at large. But minority groups, especially Black homeowners, are concentrated in relatively few communities. Out of more than 200 communities and school districts on Long Island, a majority of the Black residents are in only 8. Now, is that by choice? We have long heard from our colleagues at the newspaper, from Black homebuyers, encountering problems when they tried to shop for a home outside of those few areas. So our team followed the methods used by fair housing agencies, sending out testers posing as home buyers. This is a method that has been accepted by federal courts as evidence. We added hidden cameras to record video and audio. Now, recording of audio of a conversation that you're in without telling everybody is legal in New York, and it's legal in most states. Most state laws say that recording is legal if one person in the conversation knows that it's being taped. And that one person can be the home buyer, the tester. Hidden recording of audio is not legal in a dozen states, including Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, everyone in the conversation has to know that they're being recorded for it to be legal. But don't think you're off the hook. Don't think that we can't do testing in Bucks County. We can monitor the text messages and the emails and the voicemails between the tester and the agents with the permission of the tester. And most of all, we can see the listings that the agent sends to each tester. Let me introduce you to a few of our testers. Here you can see some of our African-American testers who didn't know that they were being sent different neighborhoods than their white counterparts. They didn't know that they were being given fewer listings. They didn't know that they were being screened differently. And of course, they didn't hear any of what the same agent said to white buyers, disparaging the neighborhoods that that agent was giving to the Black buyers. By the way, I see here a university professor from Hofstra, an IRS worker, a nurse, and a couple of young actors. New York is lousy with underemployed actors, which helped us recruit our testers. Here are some of our Hispanic testers, some of our Asian testers. Now, about the methodology. You'll meet some of our white testers in the recordings as well. The main reason that we did testing is that it's the only way to see reliably what is happening. And is testing, is steering still a thing, was the question we were trying to answer. You know, our testers who are in a fair housing test were usually unaware that they were being steered. Our testers would come back from the real estate office telling us that agent was so nice, she was so helpful. They only learned the truth, whether they were being treated better or worse than the other buyer when we brought both buyers together to watch the videos and to see the maps of the listings that the other person was getting. In this next video clip, you'll hear from a fair housing expert who was one of our advisors. And you'll meet an agent. He was a second generation realtor in business with his parents who had a different game plan for different customers. Let me play that for you. Okay, it's coming around on the guitar here. Ready? Here we go.
It almost makes me wish that the racism is more explicit so that I would know about it.
Too often I hear people who maybe aren't as familiar with this kind of work say, oh, well, they were just testers. But all you have to do is tell someone, which I have to do on a fairly regular basis, that you were turned down because of your race and tell them the circumstances that occurred on a particular test. And you will see just how real and painful that injury is.
Elmont, you know, it's okay, it's good, you're very close to the city. Some of them are not as nice, you know, Elmont.
I do remember him, he was nice, and I do remember him pointing out on the map.
Oh, he loved that map. I remember that.
Yeah, he had the map and he's like, you know.
Some of these towns, in my opinion, are not necessarily the greatest in terms of school districts, safety, you know, crime, resale.
This agent with the map, he looked like General Patton planning the invasion of Sicily. But he had a different invasion plan for home buyers of different races. You know, his first question to the white buyer was, do you know Long Island? No, she didn't. Well, do you know Hempstead, Roosevelt, Freeport, Baldwin? And he named the communities with the heaviest Black population. And then he told her, don't get off the Southern State Parkway until you get past those neighborhoods. It startled us. It startled us when some agents began their presentations. Remember, these are new customers they just met with guidance that violates the fair housing laws. I tried to figure out why this was happening. It seemed that for these agents, this was the best foot forward that they were putting. It seemed that steering was part of the service that they were selling.
Wow. Bill, can you please give us a summary of these tests? Who was tested and what was the outcome?
Yes, Darlene. Well, first, our testers gave the agents the same circumstances. They were very well trained, and we monitored the tests with the video. They were first-time home buyers, so selling another property was not involved. We chose testers of the same gender and age to match up together. We dressed them in the same business casual style. I went shopping at Nordstrom and bought an armload of purses for the women to carry so that they would have purses that were of a similar class. They asked for the same geographic area, the same price range, and the same number of bedrooms. They had the same family size and the same number of children in the public schools. And they were prepared to give the same income and credit scores, but rarely was anyone asked about their finances, other than what job do you do and your spouse, and what is your mortgage pre-approval status, on which they were the same. They weren't pre-approved. We shopped for houses at different price ranges. Now, it was always the same price for two testers paired up together in a test, but we thought we might see differences at different levels of the market. So we did tests from entry level up near the top. Now this was in 16 to 18. The story came out at the end of 19, right before the pandemic. During that period, entry level on Long Island was about $400,000. There were very few single family homes below that. We started at 400 and we made sure always that there were homes throughout the area that both testers were asking for sale on the days that they went out. We did tests at 400, 500, 600, all the way up to $1 million and $3 million and $7 million. Now, $7 million won't get you Alec Baldwin's house out in the Hamptons, the exclusive resort area at the east end of Long Island, but it will get you into his neighborhood. But then you would have Alec Baldwin for a neighbor. Now, how did we pick the agents? Did we test just the white agents? No. Did we test agents we'd heard might be steering? No. Did we choose the agents at all? We did not. We let the brokers decide which of their agents to put forward to be testing, though the brokers didn't know they were doing the picking. We just did walk-ins. We called the agency. Whoever was working desk duty or was on the board to get the next walk-in, whoever our phone call was passed to, that was our agent. Then we made sure that the second tester saw the same agent, and we mixed up the order on different tests of which race went first. Now notice that we didn't have to see the same agent. Under the law, brokers, you're expected to provide the same service to two customers, even if they see different agents. But we thought, well, that'll be harder. It would be easier to quality control, right? If the same agent is seeing two customers. So we did it that way, and we thought it would be a fairer test. So in a way, we gave the brokers a break that the next test might not give you. We did 86 of these tests, 86 pairs at 12 companies, 12 brands. And we chose them because they're the biggest. They were the largest in our area with the most listings and the most agents. Together, these 12 represented more than half of the listings in our market. And they're familiar names: Coldwell Banker, Keller Williams, Century 21, Remax, et cetera. And some regional brands that are big only on Long Island. We did not feel comfortable being the referees. So we had two fair housing experts review each test, the videos, the transcripts, for equal treatment. One, you met, runs a fair housing program in New York City and has done testing for the US Department of Justice. And the other is the law professor from the University of Kentucky who writes the legal textbook on fair housing law. Only if both of our referees independently threw a flag did we call a penalty and say an agent had failed a test. So this was not a drive-by investigation. This was a careful effort that took a team more than 3 years. Now the results. Just looking at who's treated differently one person from another. Asian American buyers were treated differently than their white counterparts 19% of the time. So 2 out of 10 cases on average failed the test. Latino American buyers were treated differently than their white counterpart 39% of the time, 4 out of 10 on average. And African American buyers were treated differently than whites 49% of the time, half the time. Out of 12 companies, there were 2 that passed all of their tests. We did multiple tests in each office. We didn't think it was fair to do just one pair in a particular office. So if we went to you once, we'd go 3 times. And then we would do your brand at multiple offices. And I see your question about what happened to the agents who failed. We'll get to that. Out of 12 companies, 2 passed all their tests. That was the local affiliate of Sotheby's International Realty, and the other was the Corcoran Group, a regional brand, and you know its former owner from the show Shark Tank. But those 2 companies passed all their tests. The rest failed at least one, and often more than one test. So it's fair to say that most of the large national and regional brands in our area were contributing to the racial segregation in our suburbs. Now, you no doubt have already asked yourself the most important question. Would the results be any different if we repeated the test this weekend in Bucks County communities and communities nearby? If this weekend, white and Black and Latino and Asian homebuyers go shopping for homes in your communities and ask for the same thing, or Christians and Muslims and Jews, or straight couples and gay couples, or singles, people with children, people without children, if they are searching for homes with the same criteria, then on Monday morning, in their email, will they be receiving all the same listings? That's the test. I won't ask you to just type your answer into the chat, but I want you to think about it for a moment. If we did 100 tests in your area, 100 pairs of people asking for the same criteria, what is your guess? Out of that 100, what number would pass the test? Judging by giving both people all the same listings, the same help and the same listings. What do you think? Let's talk about what sort of differences we saw. We saw different amounts, levels of service, first of all. Overall, our white testers got 50% more listings, 50% more listings than their black counterparts. We saw differences in how buyers were screened. Some agents refused to help our black or Hispanic buyer at all unless they signed an exclusive contract with that brokerage. They said that's the policy of our agency, and that's legal. But the same agent didn't require a contract from the white buyer, didn't even mention it. Now that's illegal. And we saw steering. For example, the agents in our test, in 1 out of 4 cases, gave maps that didn't even touch. That is, in 1 out of 4 of our tests, the minority home buyers were directed into different communities and school districts altogether, no overlap with the areas that the same agent gave to the white buyer who had asked for the same thing. Then there were inappropriate comments, illegal comments by agents, making comments about the race or ethnicity or religion of people who live in an area, or comments about the schools, comments about crime, comments about resale values, as a way of discouraging the minority buyer, no, but the white buyer, discouraging the white buyer from looking in those areas. That's steering too, especially if the agent gives contrary information or leaves out that advice for the other buyer. Some of this can be very subtle. You'll see in the video. You might like Elmont. Seems like a pretty gentle, friendly, helpful statement, except when compared with stay away from Elmont. It was fascinating. Minority buyers weren't subjected to racial comments or inappropriate remarks. We are long past the days of signs that say whites only. Now it's more subtle. Only the white buyers heard, and you can see on the videos, the inappropriate comments about race and its 3 proxies for race: schools, crime, and resale values. Here's a video clip that highlights this problem of inappropriate comments. Let me play that for you here. Okay, here we go. Ready?
America really came in, and they really took over Springs and Northwest Woods area.
Here, an agent gives conflicting advice about Freeport.
I like Freeport. Now you have a bad school district, and that's not good for resale value. All the school bus, see the moms that are hanging out on the corners.
But you don't want to go there. It's a mixed neighborhood. In the United Nations.
Because you might be more comfortable in a certain demographic area that isn't heavily one way or another in terms of the people. Bayshore has 2 school districts, Brentwood and Bayshore. You don't want to have Brentwood school districts. You want to have Bayshore school district. I can't say anything, but I encourage you. I want you to go there at 10 o'clock at night with your wife to buy diapers. Go to that 7-Eleven. They didn't buy there.
No, that's great.
I have to say it without saying it. You know, you have the knowledge of the areas.
Yes.
I don't want to use the word stealing, but I try to use the word educated areas. You know.
Yeah. How are you, Russ? Hey, Russ. Good. How are you? We're either waiting for the owner or waiting for the agent to show up.
You don't want to be. I don't think you should be in Elmont. I think you should probably just be Franklin Square.
And I remember specifically, he talked about steering. Yes, that's what he said.
Steering, yeah.
Yeah. And in the same breath, you mentioned, well, steering's bad, but this is what I'm going to do.
There's something called steering. No steering, like steering.
Oh, like a car or something?
No, like a horse,
It's like steering a horse. It seemed that some agents have gotten a message through the years, through their training or culture, that complying with the fair housing laws is some sort of political correctness, that it means not saying the wrong thing or not saying the wrong thing to the wrong person who might complain about it. The comments made by the agents were so far over the line that they sort of get all of our attention, right? In a way, I regret that, because we may forget that those agents crossed the legal line when they gave different listings to different customers, even without the illegal comment. That's just the cherry on top. That's just what gets you in more trouble in federal court. Perhaps we need more attention to steering and differential treatment and different standards for different customers. More attention to what agents do, in other words, and not just on what they say. Are agents giving the same listings? Are they providing equal professional service to all their customers?
We're talking about steering, Bill. Can you elaborate on how steering showed up in your test?
Yes, Darlene, let's sort of turn the coin over for a moment. We've been talking about buyers being steered to different neighborhoods. But look at it for a moment from the seller's perspective. Both of our testers would ask for an area within, say, a half an hour commute of a certain community, within 45 minutes of Penn Station, or 20 minutes from this town, within 20 minutes of Levittown. Well, that creates a circle around Levittown, right? And that circle may include many communities and school districts that might vary in race and ethnicity or religion or other characteristics. And sometimes we would see in the wider residential parts of that circle, the listings would be given only to our white buyer, not to the minority buyer. So we all understand in that case, that's evidence that the minority buyer is being steered around those communities. That's what we were testing for. That's the buyer side of the coin. Now turn it over. We also saw something else that we didn't expect. And this has not gotten enough attention in brokerages. I mention this because I hear this is an area where new lawsuits under the Fair Housing Act are likely to occur. We had minority communities where no one of any race got the listings. They didn't have to be majority minority communities. It took some modest amount of minority population in an area to be ignored. These minority areas were within the circle, the same circle given by both testers. There are homes for sale in that price range in their communities, but the agents didn't send those listings to either buyer. That's steering too, and that's illegal. Notice that we passed an agent on a test if they treated both testers equally. Even if for both testers, they discriminated against all the minority neighborhoods. But that's illegal too. We were the easiest graders. The agents in our test had more than 200 opportunities to share listings in the 8 largely Black and Hispanic communities. More than 200 chances, and they shared listings in those communities only 15 times. If we had counted that as a failed test, nearly everyone would have failed. Have you ever heard an agent say, oh, there are areas where I won't send you, you'll have to talk to another agent there? Have you ever heard an agent say, there are school districts or neighborhoods that I won't send you? Have you ever looked at an MLS screen or a proprietary screen for your company and picked by clicking on certain neighborhoods, but not clicking on other neighborhoods or schools, which, if we think about it, also met the criteria that were given by the buyer? That is a dangerous practice. If a buyer is looking for available single-family detached homes within 20 minutes of a community, and this buyer wants to spend between $350,000 and $400,000 and has no other criteria, which listings do you send that buyer? All of them. Do all sellers have an equal chance at your market? The first words in the Fair Housing Act are to say that you have an obligation to sellers to follow the law. That's the test. Now, remember, who has the lawsuit under the Fair Housing Act? You know, our experts said in this case, it's a very long list. First, both the minority and the white homebuyers are being harmed by being steered around minority or integrated neighborhoods. Both the minority and the white homebuyers are not being given full access to all available homes. So they have a lawsuit. But also the communities themselves are being harmed, the governments, the schools. And here's where you may see new activity in the courts. Also harmed is anyone who's trying to sell a home in those areas and their listing broker. They may also have a case under the Fair Housing Act against the brokerages that are routinely steering around their communities. And we all understand why. Fewer buyers means what? Lower sale prices, lower commissions, lower home values, lower home equity, less money for a homeowner's retirement or to send the grandkids to college, and less tax money for schools and parks and sidewalks and libraries. Now, let me share with you a short video that's just a classic example of steering, meaning directing buyers to areas that match the buyer's race. In this test, you'll meet an agent, and the agent tells one family, that's a man shopping for himself and his wife and their teenager in the public schools, tells them that a community is a good community. It has the nicest neighbors. She's always glad when she gets listings there. And the same agent warns another family, that's a man shopping for himself, his wife, and their teenager in the public schools, warns them that that same community is a dangerous place. Let me play that for you. Okay, are you ready? Here we go.
Kelvin Toon is a black man in his early 50s, and he went in to meet with an agent involving a test in the Brentwood community, a community that is 80% Hispanic and black. The agent communicated to Kelvin, our black tester, that she enjoyed meeting with clients from the Brentwood area.
Every time I get a new listing in Brentwood or a new client, I get so excited because they're the nicest people.
When we sent Kelvin's counterpart in to meet with the same agent, the white tester was actually warned about Brentwood not being a nice place.
The nursing home we need to be near is in Brentwood.
Okay.
And so we found a couple that are in Brentwood.
Pretty close to each other.
Okay. And it just seemed like those would be handy also for going to visit.
Do you want to give me them and I'll look into them for you? Or?
Yeah, I can do that.
That warning came later to the white testers saying there was concern about gang activity going on in Brentwood. This agent wanted the white tester to know, but that information wasn't provided to Kelvin, the black tester. The listings centered black tester Kelvin in Brentwood, with 27 house listings, while the white tester got 0 listings in Brentwood and was directed towards much whiter neighborhoods.
Think for a moment about the point where this agent went astray. The text message about the gang activity, about crime, that gets all of our attention, right? That's how we'll remember that test. But focus for a moment on the listings. Remember, both men were asking about an area that had Brentwood at its center. They had different reasons. One, his wife worked in Brentwood, and the other, his mother-in-law was in a nursing home in Brentwood. But they both wanted to be within 20 minutes of Brentwood, searching for the same type of house, the same price range. They asked for the same thing. She sent listings in Brentwood to the black family, but for the white family, she ignored Brentwood entirely. So we threw her a life preserver. The white buyer went on a home tour for one of the listings she'd chosen. You know, we're outside of Brentwood. And the white buyer said, hey, we printed out from online some listings in Brentwood. They're closer to the nursing home. You heard him say. And she sent him the text message about the gang activity, and she still didn't show him any of those homes that he had selected. So the comment about crime is a problem. That will make the case in federal court worse. But don't lose sight of the rest. Why didn't she just give both families all the listings in the same area that they had asked for?
Now, Bill, do you think that the agents included in the documentary were knowingly steering? Or some agents maybe believe that if steering was unconscious or unintentional, that it wouldn't rise to the level of a violation. Can you address that?
Yes.
I mean, it makes me think of my own family. And we were the first Black family in the neighborhood. And just recently I found out that my parents didn't even use an agent. Someone told them to not say anything. And we were the first Black family in that neighborhood. So I'm sure back in those days, my mother's 94 today, that I wonder if anyone would have steered my parents to that area that we ultimately grew up in.
Yeah, you wonder. There's a columnist at Newsday, a Black woman who's married to a white husband, and she said that her practice continues now. Whenever they shop for a house, that she says he does all the shopping and I just show up at the closing. Some agents, we did hear, you heard some statements in the video, some would say out loud, I shouldn't be saying this, but. That's sort of the real estate equivalent of, hey buddy, would you hold my beer? Get your camera, something interesting is about to happen. One thing that really struck the fair housing experts at NAR about our videos was that it was clear that agents, many of them already knew the law. New York already had the toughest requirement for continuing education for fair housing of any state. Knowing the law was not enough to stop steering from happening. That's why NAR created Fairhaven. Many of you have taken Fairhaven, your associations have recommended it. It's a video game, a training simulation. But you don't just play an agent trying to close a deal, you play the customer at times. NAR, in creating Fairhaven, which is very well done, wanted not just to teach the law, but to teach empathy. Now, your question is, did they know they were doing it? Were they doing it on purpose? Is it a matter of bigotry, of prejudice happening on purpose? The first point to keep in mind is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all under the law if the differential treatment is intentional or not. The Fair Housing Act and your state law cover behaviors, not thoughts or motives. The law is not a mind reader. This is a civil law, not a criminal law. Nobody cares about your motivation. It's the effect of your action, not your intent, that matters. If a real estate agent is treating one person better than another similarly situated person, and I'll share a slide with you. And one of those people is in one of the 7 categories covered by the fair housing laws, then the agent and the agent's broker have violated the law. I think you're seeing a slide here, protected classes. Here to remind you, these are the 7 classes in the federal law: race, color, sex, religion, national origin, disability, the law says handicap, and familial status. Family status we usually take to mean having children or expecting children. A couple of comments here. First of all, who's protected by these categories? Religion. Which religion is protected? The minority religion is protected? No, all religions are protected. How many of us are covered by one of these 7 categories? The answer is all of us are covered by all 7 of these categories, because all of us have a religion or no religion, and therefore that applies to us. Our group can't be discriminated against because of where we stand on any of these 7. All 7 of these apply to everybody. People tend to think of fair housing laws as protecting the minority group. They protect every group. Another point about this is that the law said sex, and courts have now said that that means also sexual orientation or any kind of gender identity. It's covered under the federal law. Now, here's a quiz for you. Which of these 7 gets all the business? Which of these 7 gets about 8 out of 10 cases in federal court and complaints to HUD? Where's all the action and complaint activity under the fair housing laws? Do you know which one? It's disability. Why? Because you can take a picture of it. You know you're in a wheelchair, you can take a picture of that, and you know that the landlord didn't give you a reasonable accommodation, as the law says, by giving you, say, a parking spot near the door. And you can take a picture of that, and you can take a video, and your wheelchair either does or doesn't fit through the door to the bathroom. You're aware of it, and you can offer proof of it. So you know to complain, and you can substantiate a complaint. In the other 6 categories, you usually have no way to prove a complaint. You may feel discriminated against, but you can't substantiate a complaint. That's why we do testing. Now, beyond the federal law, states can add additional protected classes. In Pennsylvania, it's been added age, and you understand that there's an exemption allowing a senior-only housing of certain ages. Ancestry, which is a little different from national origin, related, and use of a support animal. You can't be discriminated against people, for example, who have a service animal. Different states add different protected classes. For comparison, here are the protected classes that New York adds to the federal law. New York already had the most training and the most protected classes. To explain a couple of these, what is domestic violence victim doing on this list? Well, one example, if you call the police because you're a victim of a crime and the police come to your apartment, let's say, or your home, rented home, the landlord might view the presence of police as a sign that you're a bad tenant and might discriminate against you. So you're protected under New York law, but not Pennsylvania law for calling the police. You could headline this slide, protected classes that Pennsylvania has chosen not to recognize. Well, maybe that's a little bit too harsh, too on the nose. New York is protecting people based on military status, and Pennsylvania has chosen not to do that. On top of the federal and the state laws, here's New York City's protected classes. Having children is a little different. Residing with children is a little bigger group than having children. So that's protected. Lawful occupation is protecting people who pay for their housing through a voucher program or through Social Security disability or some other, how are you paying for it is not the landlord's issue. As long as you're not a drug dealer, you can discriminate against drug dealers. That's why it says lawful occupation. But in Pennsylvania, for example, you're back on this short list and the national list. Okay? Now, the key thing to keep in mind is that intent doesn't matter. Now, back on your question, Darlene.
Yes.
Let me go a little further on that. It also is useful to think about motivation. If you want to stop something from happening, it's important to think about, well, what are the possible reasons that agents are giving different listings, screening differently different customers? Why is this happening? So let's deal with some of the possible explanations. First, we understand that bias can be explicit, intentional, on purpose, done out of some bigotry. Within our consciousness, that's possible. I don't think it's the main problem, but it's possible. And we understand that bias can be what the scientists might call implicit or unconscious bias, and referring to like an automatic process, almost an instinct, something that happens before you're aware of it. But by whatever you call it, it means that people can act in unfair ways, even if they intend to be fair. And we're all have experienced people can be treated differently based on their tattoos or their accent or their skin color, or their hairstyle, even their name. And some of these are protected by the laws. Let me give you an example from our study of real estate agents. We did not flunk anybody for this. Nobody failed because of the babysitting test, but it was fascinating to watch. And it has to be an example, I think, of an implicit bias, something that wasn't a plan, but kept happening. Agents were more likely to tell the buyers where they live, where the agents live. Agents were more likely to say, oh, you're looking in Northport. I went to Northport High. My kids went to Northport School. More likely to divulge where they live or lived, more likely to give that sort of endorsement of a community when the buyer was white. And far less likely to give that kind of information about themselves or the community when the buyer was in a minority. One of our white buyers who had children in her, mock made up biography, she kept being offered babysitting by the agents. An agent would say, oh, you're looking in Northport. Well, I have friends in Northport. If you bought there, they could babysit for your kids. But the same agent knew that our minority buyer had kids and was looking in Northport and didn't even mention that she knew anybody there. Now, you're in an affinity business, right? I mean, you make connections. Oh, you went to Penn State. Well, my ex-wife's brother-in-law's sister's cousin went to Penn State. We're practically related. I'll be your agent, right? You make connections with customers. And it appears that some agents were making more of an affinity connection with white buyers. Something to be aware of. Now, what are the possible other explanations of the patterns that we saw? It may be that some agents are profiling, that is, assuming based on outward appearance, consciously or unconsciously, it doesn't matter, that the person of color can't really afford the home in the price range they've given, or can't qualify for the mortgage and will be wasting their time, but accepting the same price range from the white buyer without question. A point about profiling. One of the tricky things about profiling is that experts keep trying to tell us it doesn't work. Let's say in law enforcement, cops know that the real problem with profiling is that it wastes their time chasing the wrong people and not paying attention to the right people. Let's say you want to stop school shootings from happening. which we all do. Maybe you might think that who plays violent video games, or who has a history of mental health issues and treatment, or who dresses a certain way, or has bad grades, or a certain kind of family, they're more likely to be a school shooter. WHOI, the U.S. Secret Service, studied all of the school shootings in America. You can read their report online. And their conclusion is there is no profile. There is no type of kid that's more likely. What there is behavior that's related to school shooting that makes a good profile. So what's a good predictor? Stockpiling weapons, having grievances at school, telling other students, sometimes vaguely, don't be in the cafeteria on Thursday, watch out. Actions related to what we're trying to focus on, not out. So you see the difference between a type of person and a person doing those behaviors. Well, you're in a commission business. So it means that you leave money on the table if you assume that a certain kind of person can't apply, can't qualify for the mortgage, or profiling makes us less safe, profiling makes you less money. Besides, did we mention steering is illegal? What are the other possible explanations? Some agents may think it's a shortcut, that they'll make money faster with less effort. You heard an agent say, you might not feel comfortable looking in an area where people are of a certain demographic. She just met this guy, a white guy. She's meeting him for the first time in a noisy coffee shop. Why is she assuming that he wants to avoid integrated neighborhoods? Why is she assuming that he isn't already married to someone of a different race or religion? What are the other possible explanations? Agents could fear that appraisers or lenders may be biased, and that might make it hard to close a sale. There is a lot of evidence going back for decades and right up to this year, a bias in appraisal and in lending. In lending, there's that recent settlement with Berkshire Hathaway in Pennsylvania. You may have seen the large national study by Freddie Mac of appraisal differences that are not explained by the facts in the case. A tendency for Black homeowners to find comps that are not nearby, but to go to wherever you have to go to find another Black neighborhood. And then there are large, well-publicized anecdotes of the home sellers who think their appraisal was low, so they get a second appraisal on a refinancing. It's a college professor. He gets a white college professor friend to greet the appraiser the next time, and they take down all the pictures of the Black residents, the relatives, and their appraisal goes up $400,000. These are anecdotes, but there are studies too. And so appraisal bias is getting a lot of attention from HUD, from the US Department of Justice, from the appraisal industry, from NAR. Google appraisal bias and HUD, and you'll read a lot there about that. Meanwhile, of course, the legal burden is on you to treat every customer fairly. I can think of one final logical possibility, but I don't think that's it. Agents may be doing it on purpose, or might be acting out of some bigotry. I just assume that's not the common situation. That can't be 1 out of 100 or 1,000. There's, however, just too much steering going on for it to be accounted for by only bad people doing it. Good people have to be doing it too.
What role did schools play in the actions of agents?
The agents would explain to our buyers everything that's based on schools. They would say some schools are declining and others are in demand, and then often they would give different information about schools to 2 different buyers. It's important to remember that America's schools vary by race and other characteristics. And so under the law, directing someone to a certain school or ignoring another school is the same as directing them to an area with higher or lower minority population, even if race isn't mentioned. And a bit of context, it's a shock, but America's schools are more segregated now than they were in 1968, the year that the Fair Housing Act was passed. And of course, school segregation and housing segregation are intertwined because we have, in most areas, school districts. Our legal advisors were clear that you can answer factual questions, but that the legal problem arises if you're picking and choosing schools for customers, because then you might pick and choose different schools for different customers, or you and another agent might be picking and choosing different schools. Here's a discussion of schools from our video, and you'll meet an agent here who I guess, what shocked me, would write down lists of schools and would send the buyers back to our Newsday office with 2 separate lists of schools. And you'll hear from our law professor advisor on the project from the University of Kentucky.
But you don't want to go there. It's a mixed neighborhood.
Mixed neighborhood.
If agents are courteous and professional, how can you know that they're treating you equally compared with someone of a different race or ethnicity?
I have to say it without saying it,
Behind smiles and handshakes, how do you know if they're giving you fewer options or suggesting different areas?
I'm not going to send you anything you want to do unless you don't want to start your car to buy your friend.
Or that rules don't apply to you and another home buyer.
Sorry, it's my fault. We're going to get a better instructor next time. I've shared the wrong video with you, but we're going to try again. Here we go. How long did it take me to realize that? 30 seconds? We're going to try again this time. Here we go.
I said, do you really want your future children going to Amityville School District?
We're going to try and stay away from Freeport, Roosevelt, Hempstead for now because of the school district.
This part, the Salisbury part, is in demand because the schools are much, much, much better.
In Newsday's 86 paired tests, agents often applied a laser-like focus on school districts, highlighting their perceived quality when recommending places that house hunters should consider buying or avoid. Fair housing experts say touting or disparaging school districts can put agents in jeopardy because talking about school districts can be taken as a euphemism for race.
There's a few districts that I know I would I won't look in those towns.
Oh, okay.
Like Freeport and Baldwin and Amityville, which is part of Massapequa schools, but it's just certain parts of Massapequa.
If the customer asked about the quality of the schools and the agent responded with accurate information, I think the agent would be fine. The problem with talking about differentials in schools is that at least in the last 10 or 15 years, that has been a proxy for race. They don't mention the race of the community. Good schools are available in these areas. Those areas I'd stay away from because they have poor schools. I want to ask, did you tell that to the other tester? If you're only giving that information to one tester of the two, and the only difference is the race, then you've provided what I call differential service.
If you're in Massapequa, you only want school district 23. Okay. You don't want 6 in Massapequa because that takes in Amityville, and you're not going to like those schools.
NAR keeps trying to warn its members that realtors are not experts in schools. Different people want different things in a school. And if you're judging which schools are good, inevitably, much of your judgment is going to be based on school test scores. Write this on the blackboard 100 times. School test scores don't tell you how good a school is. School test scores tell you how affluent are the parents who send their kids to that school. In America, well, just statistically, the best predictor of a student's test scores all the way through college are the mother's education level. In America, the education level of the parents is connected, not 100%, but certainly connected with the race of the parents and the income of the parents. And so steering parents around certain districts, or steering just the white parents around certain districts or schools, perpetuates segregation based on race. That's why it's illegal. NAR urges you to stay away from the trap of using or responding to opinions such as good schools or nice schools. NAR urges you to give factual information. You know they built a new language lab. You know they were in the Macy's parade. You know there's a new principal. You have facts about the schools, perhaps. But to stay away from making judgments about which schools are good, because a high-performing school may just be an area with wealthier parents. Those kids, those National Merit Scholars came in as National Merit Scholars in the 3rd grade. The school didn't make that. It's more public spirited to explain to parents that they need to do their homework, as many of you do. Tell them, talk with other parents, chat with the principal, go see the teachers in the programs that are important to you. You know, if they were buying a boat, if boats were important to them, they would go look at boats.
So I'm sure that there was reaction, but can you tell me specifically what was the reaction from the real estate industry and the government?
Yes, I'm gonna go through this rather quickly. I just like to touch on what happened to the agents. You know that NAR has responded. You know that there's new training programs, a national apology, a memory that, you know, well, unfortunately, NAR opposed the passage of the Fair Housing Act. I think a recognition of these things. What happened locally was the Long Island Board of Realtors started disciplinary action against the agents who failed our tests. And the state started actions against most of them. A couple of them they thought were too close a call. They didn't start a case. And a few agents have lost their license. A few agents gave up their license instead of going through the disciplinary process. But the main thing that happened was the state didn't really investigate. The State Real Estate Commission didn't bring in testers to testify. They didn't they didn't show the listings that they were given. They essentially brought in our newspaper stories. And that's not much of a basis, the judge thought, to take somebody's license away. And I agree. And remember, we tested each agent one time. Our focus was more on the brokerages and on the companies. We tested them many times, many pairs. A few of the agents won their case because the state didn't do any investigating. And I actually think that that's okay. I think the long-term reaction is that the state started doing its own testing and doing it under the state attorney general's office, not the real estate department, and having the industry pay for it. The New York State Association of Realtors supported this whole plan. And now on a license renewal in New York, $15 or $30 for an agent or broker is tacked on for the fund that pays for the testing, everybody. Your chances of getting tested are low, but testing is happening. NAR also looked at every state law and made recommendations to its local state affiliates to beef up the fair housing enforcement laws, and it's in every state. They looked for gaps where disciplinary actions were not public or where fair housing was not given as a reason you could lose your license. And so quietly, NAR, think how remarkable this is, a trade association has come down on the side of enforcing the laws. I want to show you some slides for best practices that are suggested by NAR and are some of the remedies to stay on the right side of the law and to avoid legal problems. There were also some settlements, but look how small they were. 3 of the large real estate companies agreed to pay $115,000 when investigated by the state attorney general. That's the, that in Long Island, that's the commission on, 5 or 6 houses. Some best practices. These are recommended by NAR and fair housing attorneys as specific steps that you can take in your brokerage. First, every customer should receive the same enthusiasm and behavior. Let's say you're at an open house and you greet people warmly, you show them, you give them something to drink, a beverage. Do it for everybody. Remember, you're on video. Well, in New Jersey, you're on video. In New York, you're on video. In Pennsylvania, they're taking notes. When you follow up with customers, follow up with everyone with the same information and enthusiasm. Use checklists. We might think of checklists as something that beginners would need. It's for rudimentary. No, we've learned, social science has taught us that experience has taught us that the more important an activity is, the more you need a checklist. Surgeons use checklists now because it increases the chances that you'll remember to take the sponges out of the patient. Airplane pilots use checklists. If you're having a bad day and you're distracted and things aren't going well at home, your day will get better if your checklist reminds you to put down the landing gear. And in a real estate brokerage, a checklist can help you remember that you send the same information to everyone. You collect the same information from everyone. You share all the same referrals and services with everyone. You give the same handouts, and can especially help keep every agent in a brokerage in the same line. Develop standard answers or scripts. It really means practice, put in your muscle memory, answers to the hard questions. Is this a good neighborhood? Would you live here? Are the schools good? Which schools are good? Fairhaven is trying to get at that with some video game kind of training. Another approach is also to pass the microphone around at a company meeting and watch your colleague answer that question, which schools are good, and learn from somebody who does it better than another person. Giving an answer like, hey, realtors are not experts in school. No realtor should pick your, go do your homework. I'm going to send you all the listings until you tell me which schools you want. Then you'll get those. Use templates similarly or drafts of emails and texts. Think of all the different ways you communicate with a client through the home buying or selling process. And if you are working from draft emails and texts about each step, then it increases the chances that you provide the same information at every stage. Talk about the property, not about the people. This can mean you can talk about market trends, you can talk about types of housing, about what they've asked for and what's available. And you can see the difference. It may seem subtle, but you can see the difference between go drive the neighborhoods and learn the neighborhoods and tell us where you want to live. That's okay, sure. And one of our agents said, follow the school bus and see which moms are waiting to meet the school bus, and then you'll know. Go to the 7-Eleven at 10 o'clock at night, and then you'll know not to buy there. You see the difference between that, and you need to learn the neighborhoods. Talk about the people. No. Talk about the property. Yes. Stick to factual information, not opinion. Declining schools is not a fact. Safe is not a fact. Stick to facts. Refer customers to primary sources of information. If they want to know about crime, they can go to the police department. If they want to know about schools, they could go to the state education department and go visit schools. Qualify customers in the same way. This was, to us, a surprise that we found such differences in how people were screened. New York state law now includes a legal requirement that people be screened in the same way on whether or not they're asked for ID, whether or not pre-approval is required. There's now a statement at the top of every website of every real estate agent in New York answering the question of what they require. And do you have to sign an exclusive agreement with that brokerage? And you can answer yes or no to any of those three questions, but you have to answer the same for every customer, every client. And that's recognizing what we saw in our experience. And you could learn a lesson from that. I think this is the most important step. Give all the listings that fit their objective criteria. Don't substitute your judgment for theirs. If they haven't looked online and brought in a bunch of listings, if they don't know the neighborhoods or they're from out of town, don't pick and choose certain neighborhoods. The design of that search screen at the MLS or the proprietary software often really pushes agents to pick and click on certain neighborhoods, and it's a lot of work to click on them all. It seems almost designed to encourage that kind of selection, which is dangerous. First of all, you may not make the same choices for everybody, but how do you know what choices somebody else already made on the first half of the test? Educate buyers and owners about the fair housing laws. And partly what this means is mention fair housing at the beginning to forestall buyers and especially owners and sellers and landlords from saying things that encouraging activity that violates the law, from saying, oh, we don't want any children in our apartments, or don't bring any of that kind of person here. We follow the law, as every agent should. If a person pushes you and won't be counseled on that, then you understand that it's your obligation to drop them, to say you'll have to find another agent. And I know that's hard, but you may have to say, look, if you're going to insist on this, I can't help you. You know that your association, state associations, national, are discouraging the kind of love letters sent from buyer to seller. People read advice in the Wall Street Journal that tells them to write these letters to the sellers, and you're trying to push back against that. And the reason, of course, is that these letters, they encourage a seller and the seller's agent. They tempt them into committing a fair housing violation by picking the buyer who looks like them, who will celebrate the same holidays in the house, who will have children playing on the play set. I understand it's possible to write a legal letter. Have you ever seen a love letter that doesn't in its text or photos disclose anything about the buyer's family, race, sex, national origin, age, color? I guess it would be possible to write such a letter, but no one has ever written one. That's why they're discouraged. I understand that a federal court in Oregon said that the state law can't forbid those letters. But NAR and others have pointed out that you can put it in your agreement when people sign to post a listing. You can tell your buyers up front, I won't pass on those letters. And you can tell your sellers, I won't pass them on. Not waiting until they come in and then you have to talk about it. You can tell them up front. You can present offers, especially in a multiple offer situation, in a spreadsheet with just the terms and the finances and not with a name, because names disclose information about protected classes. I understand that all of your sellers have home cameras and they know who visited the house this afternoon. Nevertheless, you can disclose buyer number 1, buyer number 2, buyer number 3, so that you're not in a situation where anybody thinks that's the basis for the selection that a seller made when it's a competitive market. NAR makes this its main suggestion. In the broker's manual, and the links that we'll share with you after the course today, NAR has a form called the Equal Service Report, and it's a way for agents to record information about what did we ask for, what did we get, what did we share with the customer, the seller, or the buyer. And it's a way for the broker to monitor whether different agents are providing the same areas to people who have the same criteria. If the brokers on Long Island had all used the Equal Service Report, the registered letter from Newsday would not have been the first inkling that they would have had that there had been a test and that they had failed it. Here's that full list. Now, I'd just like to give you a last thought for a second. How hard would it be to stop steering? while we were conducting this test, of course, we would talk about this. We've watched 400 hours of video, and it's clear they know testing happens. Some of our testers were asked, are you with the real estate department, the Department of State in New York? And they knew there was testing. So why are they still steering? How, if they wanted to stop steering, could they? Well, how hard would it be? I want to give the law professor, our advisor from the University of Kentucky, just a quick, this is the shortest video, just the last word on this subject. Be careful here, watch out. He really steps up to the plate and takes a swing. Hold on to your hat.
I'm a law professor at the University of Kentucky, and I've been a law professor for a long number of years. All we're asking in these tests, you get two people who come in and ask for exactly the same thing. Why don't you give them the same listing? Why don't you pre-qualify them in exactly the same way? It's not that big a burden. This is a law. This should be treated like a tax law or any other law. You have to obey this law, and particularly if you're in a licensed business like real estate agents, if you can't obey the law, you ought to just get out.
Now, I told you he was going to take a swing. I think he's on the right track, show all the same listings, but the complexity is, I assume that all of you want to obey the law. I don't think that wanting to obey the law is what's missing here. What might be missing is a recognition of the ways that even people who intend to be fair might not act in fair ways. I encourage you to share our videos and our stories with your colleagues and with your customers. Have a movie night, have a training class in your brokerage, but don't have a conversation about, well, who's the bigot in our brokerage? That doesn't seem very helpful. And it doesn't get at what the problem is likely to be. That's not the right question. The question is, how do things work in our brokerage? How is our broker confident that every agent will provide customers with equal professional service and the listings that meet what they ask for? That's the right question. Now, you may have other questions for me, and I am eager to hear them. I really appreciate your attention and your invitation. I'm eager to hear anything else that you might want to add. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill.
Darlene, are there any questions listed in the chat that you wanted to present to Bill?
Yes. I think a lot of them got answered. There was one from Ann Rubin, and she was asking to see if there's any discussion about a follow-up investigations to see if things have changed.
You know, there hasn't been, and if you think about the cost of this this easily would have cost Newsday several $1 million. It's a significant expenditure of time for a number of staff. And you're not going to see the same newspaper go out and do more testing, I don't think. What you're going to have is a continuing state effort at testing. Someone asked about ethics hearings. There's a state hearing where all the brokers and agents were subpoenaed, and you can watch it on YouTube. Search for New York State Senate testing, Long Island divided. You can find a full hearing where the agents essentially said, we didn't mean to steer, so therefore it's not illegal. That was their position. And the legislators understood that that's not true. The agent who said follow the school bus, she said she just wanted the buyers to know where the bus routes were. Some of the answers were of that sort, but others seem more genuinely, hey, I'm gay, I can't be discriminating, or hey, I'm black, I can't be discriminated. Not really a very clear understanding of what makes a practice legal or illegal. There were these few settlements with the New York Attorney General that won't cause anybody any pain. The sort of twin approach is education, fair haven, at home with diversity courses. But everybody realizes that if you want to stop speeding, you need to give out speeding tickets. So there's really two ways to do that. There's New York's way in the law now, there's testing, And there's NAR's way, which is, well, we'll do it quietly, but we'll do it internally, and we'll help brokerages. You know, if you're a Keller Williams agent and you know that Keller Williams might be testing you, that strikes me as having some impact that will be long lasting. So that I think it's the sort of thing which requires effort of various sorts, training, enforcement. And the classes in New York, though they were required, were very poor and barely touched on steering. And so both the New York State Association and NAR have worked now on revamping fair housing courses. So better education is part of it.
Excellent.
Something else?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I see wonderful comments, excellent information.
Yes. Yeah, I just can't thank you enough, Bill, for your time and the talent of you and your team in putting this together in the first place. And I'm just so pleased that Bucks County Association of Realtors can be part of the solution here by educating our members. I am going to again encourage everyone to do the Fairhaven exercise. NAR also has a new implicit bias course that is going to be starting, and we at BCAR are looking into offering that implicit bias course. I think all of these, you know, there has to be a multi-pronged approach to this. Yes. And we're thrilled to be part of that in any way that we can be. So I thank you so much, Bill. And I thank everyone for hanging in with us. I know this was a little longer than our normal Zoom Power Hour, but it's such an important topic and message that we didn't want to shortcut it at all. So thanks to everyone. We will be sending out this recording and the information, the resources that go along with this. So everyone watch your emails from us. And thank you all. And I wish everyone a happy Fair Housing Month, right? Take care, everyone.
And join the DEI committee.
That's right. Join the DEI committee. It's a workhorse committee. You have my
personal invite.
They work so very hard. There's a lot going on with that. So feel free to check our website and the calendar, our association calendar. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Everyone. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rose and Darlene.
Thank you.